everyone. In today's video, we are going to be talking all about R packages. We've used them, we've loaded them, we've installed them into R, but we haven't really talked about what they are or how to make them. So for example, dplyr. It's a collection of functions that are really useful for data science and data analysis. And I think we take for granted that these functions exist, but somebody actually had to code them and make them usable. So putting all these kind of related functions into an R package allows you to have organized documentation, share your packages with the world, as dplyr has become quite popular in the R community. You can also have templates for organizing your work. There's built-in checks to make sure that your code is working, and you can also attach data sets to share. So in that Palmer Penguins package, there's a data set called Penguins, and loading that package allows us to have access to the Penguins data. So the dplyr package is actually just a bunch of code all put together in a specific way. And here it's hosted on GitHub. So we can actually go in and look at any of these functions. We can look at the actual code behind it. There's documentation. And even if we don't look through the actual code, we can load it in quite easily from GitHub directly in R. For this topic, we are going to be following along the square example from the whole game chapter of R packages. I'll link it below. And this is going to allow us to build a very simple package, but explore all the functionality. And with that, let's get started. Okay, so I am starting in a blank project here. I've got nothing open. And what I want to do is in the R console, maybe if you have a file open, it's kind of at the bottom here, we are going to install and load the DevTools package. And this is required for making an R package, which we'll do in the next step. So if you need to install it, you can do install.packages DevTools like that. I can reinstall it. And then you're going to call library DevTools. Once we have DevTools installed and loaded, we are going to run create_package. And all of this is going to be run in the console. So you're not writing this in an R script, it's not in the terminal, it's just in the console here. So we are going to call create_package, and we need to tell it where to create a folder that this package is going to live. For me, I'm going to save it just on my desktop, and I'm going to put it in a folder called Powers because that's the package name that we're going to demo today. So then our studio is going to restart, and every time that it restarts, you're going to have to load back in DevTools. So just be aware if something goes weird when you're doing this, you might just have to reload DevTools. So now if I go to my desktop in these files here, I can see a new folder called Powers, and it has all this stuff already loaded into it. And basically what R is doing, or R Studio is doing, is setting me up to create an R package. We want to write all of our functions in their own R scripts. So we're going to go to File, New File, and just add an R script. I'm going to save this as, we are going to name this whatever the function we are going to be making. I'm going to make one that's going to square whatever data I provide it. And it's going to be saved in this R folder. So I made square.r and I'm saving it in that R folder. So now you can see that was renamed, and I'm ready to just write my function. So if you're new to functions, go check out the previous 2 lectures because I'll link them below as well, because they're going to be relevant for building R packages. Okay, so I'm going to write my function, and I'm just going to call it square, and it's going to take in some input, some argument called x, and it's just going to return the square of it. So that's fine, that function will work just fine, but we also need to add this export command. And this is going to ensure that it works properly with our package. Save that, and then we are going to, if needed, if you haven't already, run DevTools into your library again, library DevTools, and then we are going to run the document function. So you can see it's updating the Powers documentation, loading Powers, and writing some namespace. Any functions with this export tag will be exported to this namespace file. and we can see that we are going to export the square function. It's okay to open this file and look at it, but this document is read-only. We're not going to edit it by hand. That document function that we ran is going to add everything that we need to this namespace. So we now have a function that we're going to associate with this package. So the goal is that if someone loads this package in called powers, there should be a function called square that is available for them to use. In order to share this, one way that we can do this is by hosting it on GitHub. So we're going to call use_git, and it's going to say, do you want to commit these files? And is it okay to commit? And your options are usually like yes or no. Choose whichever one means yes. It could say absolutely, it could say yeah. You're just going to put that selection in there and hit enter. So if RStudio restarted, you should always call library devtools just in your console there. And we now have synced everything with Git. What we can do now is actually test out our package. So we're going to call load_all, and it should say that we're loading this powers package. And within powers, we wrote a function called square. So if I start to write square, I should see that there is a square function, and it's from the package powers. And I can test this function out. I could say, what's the square of 5? It should give 25. I could try the square of 0. It should give 0. -2, it should give 4. Seems to be working as expected. So after testing out this function, we can check that the package of a whole is intact. And we can do that by running check. I have 2 warnings, but there were no errors. And one of the warnings is actually that I did not document my function square. So we're going to be doing that next. We are going to be editing this description file. It's part of something that's generated when you create a package in R. And we are going to use_MIT_license, if you spell it correctly, to update this licensing. And I'm just going to put my name in there, and it will change the license for me there. Next, I can manually change the title of the package. We'll call it Easy Computations of Powers. We can change the authorship. Role is I'm an author and a creator. A description of what the package does. And I can leave everything else as a default. Save. And now it's time to generate a README. We are going to use_README_RMD. And once we run that, it is going to create a README for us, and it will open automatically. So the output is a GitHub document, so this will make it easily read on that README section of GitHub. And it's going to generate README.md. So I'm going to add a description of what the package is. I'll just say this is a minimal working example of an R package. And for installation, we are going to say, well, we can actually install this by calling devtools install_GitHub, your GitHub username /powers. So mine is GRCETMPK, but you can fill in your own GitHub username there. Then we can show an example of how to use this package. So example, I could just show the square of 6. It shouldn't be 36 when I run that. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to remove this and just leave this as my README for now. Now that I've changed my README, I'm going to run build_README. I should do this every time that I've changed anything in that readme.rmd file, and it is going to generate that .md file, which now appears when I refresh it. Now, if you watch the functions lecture, one thing that we didn't really do here is actually document the function. So we're going to take the time now to do that. So the export should be the last thing that we have on there, but we are just going to write some documentation using Roxygen 2. So I'm going to give it a title. We need to give it a description. We have some parameters, some arguments that are in the function. It's X, and it should be a numeric type. Could be a single number or a vector. And maybe we'll want to add an example too. So we could add examples. Well, let's say square 5, and maybe we'll try squaring a vector as well. So maybe square 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to have export, and our function is pretty well documented. We don't really need inline code here because the function, or comment, sorry, because this function is quite simple. So I'm okay with that. Let's save it. And we are going to run document again. I spelled params wrong. I think it's just param. Run that again. And we can see that we have updated some documentation. We can run check again and see if those errors went away. And they did. We have a note, but that's okay. Now we're going to install the package. So let's run install into the console. And we've loaded in that powers package. So let's try using the square function. Square 5, we can try squaring a vector. It works. And if we call $square, we have some R documentation that appears in this very familiar form if you've looked at any other documentation for R functions or packages. Now let's expand on our package. So we have the basics, but we can add a couple of more things. One of them including tests. So we talked about testing our function in that functions lecture, and we can actually use the testthat package within our building package steps to test our function. So we're going to run use_testthat into the console. And again, if you're getting an error, try loading DevTools first. This is going to create files, if we refresh this, called tests and testthat and testthat.r. So testthat.r looks something like this. And what we can do to actually add tests is we can run use_tests and name whatever test. We'll call ours square because we're going to test the square function into the console. And this will create a new file, and it's going to be in the testthat folder right here and called test-square. So we are going to put our tests here, and I'm just going to test. I'm going to say the message is the square function works. I'm going to test a bunch of cases, squaring just a positive number, 0, a negative number, a vector, and then some NAs to ensure that they are just also NA. So we can save that there. And now when we call test in the console, we are going to check all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these tests, and we can see that we have passed 5 tests. This also happens when you run check. So along with checking all those things to do with the function, it's also going to test your function using the ones that you wrote here. Now, we have synced this project with Git, but we haven't put it to GitHub yet. So what we can do is in the console, we are going to use use_GitHub. I'm going to say, yes, I want to create and push to new GitHub repo. And it's going to say creating that repository, my username /powers. Is it okay to commit? Yes. And then when I go to GitHub, I can see this is going to pop up, but I can also just go to my profile, look at my repositories, and powers should be there. So I should have all of the files that I created. If I go to R, I have square R. And yeah, there's some things that we can add to also that aren't tracked just yet. So this is just the initial commit that was made. So let's add the tests that we created. Well, we kind of already know how to do that. We can go to the Git pane and we can stage everything that way and click push and commit them. Or I like to use the terminal. I am just going to write git add dot. So stage any files that have changed, git commit, and I'm going to say that I'm adding tests for the square function. That's my message. And then I'm just going to go git push origin main. And that is going to, oh, it might actually be master for this one. Yeah, so sometimes it's called main, sometimes it's called master, try both. And yeah, it pushed it to that master branch or that main branch. I can see that that's what that's called here. And now when I refresh my GitHub page, everything should be updated. So I have a ton more files. I have my tests folder, I have testthat, and I have my square tests as well. So now we have our package on GitHub, but maybe we want to add even more information to tidy everything up, make it very consistent with other packages, and maybe someday publish it. So we're going to make what we call a vignette, and that's basically a long form document that's a really detailed guide for using this R package. So we are going to use _vignette, and we're going to call it powers. And then we're going to write, build, not there. We're going to write build underscore vignette. And you have to spell it right, that's important. And now we have a vignette that was built for us. We can also include a data set in our R package, so I'll show you how to do that as well. I'm just going to attach this package that already exists in R. We've used it a couple times, called mtcars. So I'm just going to use underscore data and just write the name of the data set. It already exists on R, it's already in my environment, and I just do that. So it's going to create a data folder and put it into that folder. So now I'm at the point where I've, again, made some changes and I think I'm ready to release my package. So I'm going to make a NEWS.md file, and this is going to be for main development notes. And I'm just going to do this by running use underscore news underscore md. It's going to create that file. Let's say yes to committing that because I want it eventually to be on GitHub. I said made a commit with that message. And now I'm just going to commit my changes again. So I can go to my terminal, git add, git commit. And on this one, I pretty much just added my vignette. So I could say add it vignette. And then I just push the changes. So I'm going to git push origin. Mine is called master, it might be called main. You can also make other branches, totally up to you. And if you need a refresher on GitHub, I will link that lecture below as well. So now everything is up to date on GitHub, and I should be seeing those changes that I made. I added the vignette, and I added a news.md file. And now I'm ready to release it. So we are going to tag a release on GitHub. So on the main page of your GitHub repository, mine's just whatever that package was called, powers, there should be a small link on the right-hand side that says create a new release right here. For the tag version or name, I'm just going to put 1.0.0 because it's my first release. There are some good tag practices that you can read about here. And you can add some release notes if you'd like. I'm going to leave everything else as default. This is not a pre-release. And I'm going to publish it. Oops, I need to add a tag. So I'm going to add the tag 1.0.0 as well and publish that. So now I have my package, it's ready to go. And other people can actually install this directly from my GitHub. So I'm going to open a new R session and show you how I could do that. So I'm going to close out of this project. And I'm just starting fresh here. So I've got nothing in my environment. I'm not in that project. And I'm going to try installing this package from GitHub. Well, let's use DevTools. And I'm going to use install underscore GitHub. So I'm going to call install underscore GitHub from the DevTools package. And I am going to load in my package, or maybe your friend who's sitting next to you, their package, and see if everything works. So I've installed that package, but now I need to load it into my library. And now I have access to that square function, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to put some more resources in the description and also link the written lecture in case you need to refer back to the notes. But that should get you started with building your first R package. And I hope that you found this video useful. If you found this helpful, let me know, leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.